Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Sunday Talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. And I'm one of your two hosts. I'm Nora Kyle.
And I'm the other one of your two hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
Yes.
We argue over which one is number one and number two. Her. She is number one.
Maybe someday I will feel like number one, but giving it time. So we are going to be talking about happiness today. But before that, we just want to touch base with those of us who are checking in on YouTube after the fact, after we recorded our awesome group call. Thank you for joining us on YouTube, and we hope you appreciate our content. If you like this video, leave us a comment, leave us a like. If you don't like it, leave us a comment or leave us a like. We really appreciate that. Leave us a dislike, actually.
As a matter of fact, if you dislike this video, I would suggest to you, in the strongest possible terms, that you send the link to this video to everybody in the world who you don't like. It would be a way to get under their skin. It would be fun for you. And so for those, and you know who you are. There's a few trolls out there who have tried to troll us before. But for everybody else, we love your comments. We will try and answer every single one of them.
Yeah, we've gotten some good ones too, so thank you.
We tend to get very high quality comments. I'm actually really jazzed about that. And likes.
Yes, likes, comments, subscribe, keep up with us. We post content every single week, sometimes twice a week. We have other events going on. Join our mailing list and you can find out about that through our newsletters and all that stuff. So again, thank you for being here.
And somebody subscribed last week, and you know who you are. And that means that you have the right to request a topic from us, because that was the deal last week, that if you subscribed, you could request a topic. And focus is weird on the camera today. Anyway,
so I just want to add one more thing. We're going to have more to say about it at the end of the talk, but we want to talk about the virtual retreat we're planning for next month. So stay on board if you want to hear more about that.
Actually, let's give them a quick synopsis now, because there's a lot of people who are going to get to the point where we say that's all, and then they're going to stop because they don't want to listen to the commercial. So now we make them listen to the commercial. Watch my hand and listen to the commercial, and we will tell you cool things.
All right, go for it.
I'm going to go for it?
Yeah, you're going to go for it.
Me and my big mouth. So we're doing a virtual retreat, a 1-month retreat, a khalwat, as it were, which is a kind of spiritual retreat within our tradition. This is not going to be a classic Sufi retreat by any means, because pretty much everybody who is doing this is not going to be a Sufi. So why would we do that? This is going to be 1 month of, we're going to do the reset, the dietary reset. So we're going to ask everybody to look at the 1 month reset way of eating and adhere to it. It's not a diet. You are not required to restrict any calories. You can eat as much as you want, but you eliminate certain foods for 1 month. We are going to have daily meditations for you to do. We're going to have readings. The reading is going to be my own translation of the Spandakarika, which is one of the most important spiritual texts out of India, as far as I'm concerned. It's short, it's easy to read, and it is translated so that Americans and Australians and other English-speaking people can understand it, as well as a recitation every day, and a few other fun things. And, oh yes, intermittent fasting. Not a lot, twice a week for 16 hours. Counting the time that you're asleep. So it's really easy to do, and it's really good for you, and it helps focus the mind. So
So this is going to be from October 30th. No, wait. Yeah.
No,
September 30th through October 30th. And that extra day is meant to accommodate the time difference between Australia and the United States, because that's where we have a lot of people who may be participating, and we want to make sure that we all get in that 30 days. So,
yep.
So more forthcoming about that. I will be sending out an
talk
email.
more on, we'll tell you about some of the things that we're going to do at the end of this. So that's something you have to look forward to if you make it all the way to the end of this video, is that we will tell you secrets.
Yes. So now that we've put all of our students and participants to sleep.
No, I didn't use my go to sleep voice. I used my stay awake voice.
Yeah. Cool.
So now we are going to talk about happiness.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. And so it has been suggested that happiness is important. Of course, most people who suggest that can't even tell you what happiness is. Can anybody give me a working definition of happiness? And ongoing happiness. Happiness is a verb, right? It is not a noun. It is not an abstract noun. It is a verb.
I see you thinking, Palin. What are you thinking about?
Just remember hearing before that happiness is something we happen upon. And that was when Mr. Stock said verb, that's what came to mind.
That we happen upon happiness? Sometimes that's true. So there are a lot of theories on happiness out there. Probably the best that I've run across is by a woman.
Shuri.
Shuri is going to say something?
I saw her unmute herself.
Oh,
it was by accident, I guess.
Tell us, Shuri.
Now you're on the spot, though.
I was going to say happiness is being able to live with your choices.
That sounds pretty good to me.
One possible type of happiness is to be able to live with the choices that you've made, because the discontent of the choices that you make, the regret, the resentment, the whole thing, it's like, well, you know what? That was the best choice you could make at that time. So be happy with that.
Well, that's certainly true. Yes, absolutely.
In the next moment, make another choice.
Mm-hmm.
So, there is a woman whose name I am not going to try and pronounce because I will butcher it.
And she tries so hard to get us to pronounce it right, too.
Some over 10 years ago, she wrote a book called The How of Happiness. She is a PhD professor at University of California in Riverside.
I'm going to attempt it. It's Sonia Lyubomirsky.
Yes.
So it's a Russian name.
But I am going to put a link to the book down here in the comment, or not in the comments, in the description, so that you can find the book and look her up and everything. And as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to the idea of happiness, she's done the most interesting research I've seen. Though from my perspective, she's somewhat limited, but that's okay because she's a scientist. She's supposed to be limited to what she's studying. So for me, happiness is a state that you move through that has certain aspects to it. One of those aspects is the most important, to me, the most important aspect is contentment. Happiness and contentment to me kind of go together. And so the greater level of contentment you have, the greater level of happiness you have. Another aspect of happiness is yeah, it's hard to say. So happiness can last for moments or for hours or for days. And everybody has a general baseline of happiness, what they call a set point. It's like your body has a set point in its metabolism, the weight that it likes to be. Your mind and emotions have a set point for happiness. Were you waving at me, Noor?
I'm sorry, I was waving at our,
Mustaqim?
yes.
Okay. Hello, Mustaqim. Happy to have you here. So, the question is, are you happy? Could you be more happy? Do you want to be more happy? And if so, what can you do about it, if anything? For a lot of time, the idea was that people can't really change their level of happiness, at least not on any permanent basis. And I find this to be untrue. But you have to be clear on what you're changing. Joy can be a part of happiness, but joy is very exuberant, and it gets towards the level of bliss. And that's not a level of happiness that can be sustained for any length of time. My contention is when they talk about Ananda in Sanskrit, it's usually translated into English as bliss, but it should be translated as contentment. So when they say Sat Chit Ananda as the components of enlightenment, it's being, consciousness, contentment, not bliss. So, scientists have figured out that about 50% of what makes you happy is biological, it's genetic. People actually have a genetic predisposition towards happiness. And that's something that is very difficult to nudge one way or the other. You can nudge it down easier than you can nudge it up. Post-traumatic stress syndrome will nudge it way down, that sort of thing. So 50% of everything that you're dealing with, you can't change. Then you have about 10%, if your life is going okay, you have about 10% that is environmental, circumstantial. And that you can't change, or it's hard to change. If you are living in danger, this does change. If you are a refugee living in a refugee camp, that 10% ends up to being about 45%. If you are living in a state of constant war, same thing. If you are living in poverty, same thing. If you are living with an abusive parent or partner, same thing. But if your life is okay, about 10% of what's going on that has to do with whether or not you're experiencing happiness is going to be circumstantial. And then the other 40%, you have agency over. And that's something that was my great takeaway from Sonia's book. I'm going to call her Sonia so I don't butcher her last name. Dr. Sonia, because she is a PhD and she is very, very smart. My big takeaway from that is I could actually look at it and say, yeah, 40% of my life, I have absolute agency over whether or not I'm happy. And that's a huge amount of control. Now, the big question is, why would you want to be happy? A lot of people who are in spiritual work think that being happy is somehow you're slighting yourself in some way, especially if you're in like the Gurdjieff work. Some of them dudes are so serious. They don't want no happiness. It's like they want the hard work. They want to slave. They want to make the super efforts. They want to just bust their asses constantly. They, in my experience, a lot of them are pretty grim. So why would you want to be happy if you are on a spiritual path? This is not a rhetorical question. Please feel free to answer. If you're listening to this on YouTube, make a comment, please, on why you would want to be happy on a spiritual path, why happiness would be something that would be desirable. So what do you guys think? Don't make me call on you by name.
For me, if I'm not happy, then the other states, negative states, will just suck the vitality and motivation to continue working on myself. Happiness is its own reward in the way that you feel enjoyment in doing a practice, and you can feel even a small benefit makes it worthwhile. If there is no reward for me, I find it very hard to continue to doing the work of being a better human being.
That's a really important point. What she said. Happiness actually helps you stay focused in the work. It's part of your self-reward system. If you've got some happiness going on, your brain is releasing some serotonin, little dopamine here and there, a nice chemical reward saying, do more of this.
And Aaron says, a state without happiness is unsustainable.
In the long term, absolutely the case. And Cherie touched on something very important. Part of happiness is enjoyment. When you are enjoying what you are doing, your happiness level goes up. And so groups that get you to suffer to do the work are not cognizant of this, and they wonder why people don't advance.
My other point about sucking the vitality out of you is important to me too, because if you're spending so much of your energy just trying to stay on that path of that grimness, the vitality is much diminished. For me, that's an important point, not just of gaining happiness, but if I'm expending my energy in so many different activities and practices, ones that suck the vitality is not worthwhile to me.
Yeah.
Or, we should give ourselves permission to feel that they're not worthwhile. Because I know that's one way that burnout happens, is that we keep pushing through things that are proving to be not worthwhile. And we think that that suffering that we're experiencing, that lack of energy, lack of inspiration, we think, well, this is just the way it is. And I guess this is me keeping my commitment. But, it ends up being that you're committing to suffering. I'm thinking of, like my time around people who are experiencing that within social justice circles, people who work in medical environments and nonprofits and things like that.
Yeah, and happiness is not the goal. Happiness is the lubrication that will get you to the goal. The work is hard. The work requires that you confront areas of your ego that you would rather not confront. The work requires that you tear down constructs that you've made of yourself in your in your mind. Tear down the persona. Get past it. This is painful. If you stay only with that pain, though, it's like, why do it? So the reward of experiencing greater happiness as you go through and out the other ends of these things is very important.
Just going to add to that really quickly from my own experience. When I am extremely unhappy, my body holds a lot of tension. And then so the body, it can be in a lot of pain. It doesn't move as well. Immune system doesn't work as well, all of that. But the interesting thing about pain, as Mishtak was saying, pain hijacks attention. And
Yep.
so when I am unhappy, my awareness, my attention is stuck. It's very stuck, and I can't gain a higher attention span or a higher awareness that I would say is actually would be able to move me down the path.
Yep. That's exactly right on. Mustaqim asks, is happiness a sign that you are on the right path? And I could say that it certainly can be. And that gets us to another interesting thing about happiness, is that happiness is transitory. Happiness is not necessarily a steady state, though everybody has a set point of happiness that they experience. When something happens that makes you happy, that is not going to become the new steady state. Interesting study. People get married and they experience an uptick of happiness. This uptick will last between 18 months and 24 months. And then you return to whatever your steady state of happiness is. So it does not stay that way. The good news is that if you're smart and you're doing your work, you will find other things that raise your happiness with your partner. And so it doesn't have to completely wear off, but that's the nature of the thing, is 24 months and you're back to your baseline. For pretty much anything. The good news, though, is that a few minutes of happiness does you a world of good for a very long time. I'll give you a simple example. So I just had a birthday, and one of my friends sent me a birthday present, and it's this thing here. I don't know if you can see this. It is a tasbih. A tasbih is a set of prayer beads. Now, I have to tell you that I've had tasbihs for most of my life, and I lost my favorite one a few months ago. And so I was tasbihless. And so my friend sends me this cute little tasbih, and it's not like fancy or anything. It's just nice. And since then, every time I pick it up and I run it through my fingers and I sit here and I do my practices with it, I experience an uptick of happiness that lasts for several minutes or more. And then I don't notice it until I see the beads again and I pick them up, and I still experience that. It's like, it's just a little happy thing. Those little happy things can change a whole life if you let them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Noor, am I blathering?
No, you're not. And I think we need to, yeah, like you were saying, this expands to jobs, new homes, new cars, new people we meet and hit off a friendship with. We are always going to return to baseline after the high wears off with those things. But it's the effort we put in to appreciate that keeps us going. And yeah, I mean, this is where Mr. King's question may slip in nicely. Does being awake bring happiness automatically?
No. Being awake brings being awake automatically. Nothing else. Being awake means that you can notice more often those little things that can create happiness. So you will probably experience more happiness in the awake state, especially in the sense of contentment or satisfaction. At least that's my experience. When I'm sitting in the awake state and I'm just, you know, moving along, doing whatever I'm doing, I experience a pretty profound sense of contentment. And that is the core to happiness for me.
I guess I do have a curiosity, at least. And it seems like there are two somewhat different components to what I would consider happiness. One is
Probably more than that.
one is more like a feeling, which is kind of what you've been talking about, a feeling of contentment, a feeling of pleasure, maybe even so forth. Another one though seems to be like a judgment. There's the judgment I make upon my life or upon my adventure, current adventure, and I either like it or I don't like it. I consider it good or bad, and that seems to be also a component of what I would consider to be happiness.
Yeah.
No matter how much fun I'm having, if I judge that it's a bad thing to be doing or I'm wasting my life or so forth, there isn't really happiness in that. There's pleasure, but not happiness necessarily.
Yeah, that will definitely have something to do with your happiness. I don't think that that is happiness itself, but if you are making those judgments on your life, then it's going to have an effect on your happiness for sure. And that's going to get us into the part of this talk where we talk about things that you can do that will increase your happiness.
Okay.
And one of them is stop judging your life like that. Or pay attention to the judgments and only do the things that actually make you happy to as much as possible. Some of those fall into the circumstances. So there are circumstances that you do not have control over in your life. Trying to think of so I don't have control over what my landlord charges me for rent. I could get very, very upset about that. I could go, well, I'm spending so much money on that because I live in the Bay Area and that money could be going to better uses and all of this kind of stuff. And I could make myself miserable over it. Or I could say, you know, this is what rent costs in the Bay Area. If I want to be here, that's what I pay. And I'm fine with that. I have no control over, say, Kyle's choices. She is a free agent. And even though we are very closely aligned in how we think and what we do, she still has her own agency. And I do not have control over that agency. And so I have to be content with her choices. And I can't beat myself up because, oh, I choose to work with Kyle and she chooses to do this. And I don't like this, but I chose to work with her. So, you know, I can't do that. Help me out, folks. What are some other circumstantial things? I don't have that many circumstantial things that I sweat about.
Well, I mean, for me, having a disability shook up my life a lot, you know, realizing I had a genetic condition and it kicked me down a few pegs when I found out. And I spent a couple of years feeling really sorry for myself about it. But once I realized I had to come to terms with it, that I was stuck with it, gradually I came back up to my baseline of, you know, my set level of happiness, and I don't have control over that, but I do have control over how I manage it, how I frame it, how I think about my future, things like that. And it doesn't get me down.
So I guess, I mean, the classic sort of spiritual statement, I guess, is that we may not have control over our circumstances, but we have control over how we respond to those circumstances. I don't know if that's 100% true, but that's, you know.
Well, it's at least 50% true, according to science.
Right. Yeah. Yep. We can't control who our parents are. That's one thing. We can't control what they do, how they may respond to us. We have no control over those things, but we do have control over how we interact with them on our end.
So, what can we do to increase our level of happiness? We will give you a couple of ideas. One, and this is one of my favorites, is the 1 month practice. And that is, imagine that your life is going to utterly change. Maybe you're going to die. Maybe you're going to move away from all of your friends or whatever in 1 month. And act as if that were true. You have a month to do whatever you're going to do. And believe it or not, that can very often increase your level of happiness because it's very focusing on what is actually important. If you had 1 month to live, what would be really important to you?
And that's going to be different for everyone.
Yeah, nobody's going to have the same answer to that. And you don't have to answer that out loud, but I want you to think about it. If you had 1 month to live, how would that change the way you lived your life? And Mr. Gurdjieff points out that the human ability to ignore their own imminent death is one of the ways that human beings keep themselves anesthetized, keep themselves asleep, because they have this illusion that, oh, I have all the time in the world. And the younger you are, the more you have that illusion, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
Myself, Ilmar, we can tell you that that's an illusion, and you can feel death creeping up on you every day. And so that becomes more focusing. I recommend that you start now and avoid the rush.
So go for it.
No, after
Okay. So Mushtaqim offers us a comment which I think is perfectly honest, and some people are going to have this reaction to this practice, which is somehow imagining that brings up feelings of panic.
Yeah, and that's informative.
Yeah.
That's going to tell you some stuff about yourself. And yeah, it's a scary thought. I could drop dead any second. So could you. We don't know. I remember somebody sent me a video of people on television dropping dead. Not like being shot or anything, but just like having a heart attack or a stroke and just right in front of the cameras. And I looked at that and went, yeah, that can happen. It does not bother me now When I was 20 years younger, it would have probably bothered me more. When I was in my 20s, I could barely conceive of it because, as every 20-year-old knows, you're immortal and invulnerable. You don't figure out that that's not true until at least your 40s. And sometimes not even in that case. So, do you know what the most common last words on recorded for a person is just before something happens that kills them? The first most common is "oh shit." The second most common is "hold my beer." Third most common is, "hey everybody, watch this." So, what to do when you have a panic attack when contemplating your own mortality? First thing, breathe. Do the fundamental breath. That in itself will slow down the panic, and allow yourself to just experience the fear of it without panicking. The idea that, yes, at any moment, your life could cease to exist. That's the way the game is played. It's like we do not know the moment of our own passing. And by living our life as if it could happen at any time, gives us great focus and allows us to be very, very motivated in our work. You don't have all the time in the world, so get your work done now. There's that.
I'm reminded of a friend who, when she'd be in a really bad mood, she'd go, I'm in a shitty mood and don't try to make me come out of it because I'm going to enjoy it. And I've never forgotten that. And it just cracked me up. She goes, yeah, if you're in that particular state, you may as well just be there, enjoy it, get over it, and move on. And I always think about how whatever experience you're feeling, if it's a panic attack, if you go for a full immersion, you process it and you can move on. But if you don't actually feel those things, if you don't feel anger, if you don't feel pissed off or something, it comes back because you haven't really felt it. So as a human being, it's just an experience and move on, and then you can get to the happiness. If you don't have contrast in your life, you won't be able to feel what's happiness and what's unhappiness. So while you're there, just feel it all, just take it all on, and then see what happens.
Yep. The only caveat I would have to that is if you're around other people, let them know that they're not the problem.
Yeah, it's just
and yeah, that happens with Nora and I, and not all that often because neither of us tend to be terribly grumpy. But if I'm feeling grumpy, I'll be walking around going, I'm feeling really grumpy, and it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's not my job to resolve that for you. And you get to hold on to that for as long as you want, just as long as it doesn't
Just as long as I don't put it on you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And vice versa, of course.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, why are we suggesting this practice? What does it bring up for us, do you think? This, living as if this is the last month, that kind of thing.
It brings up a sense of focus and immediacy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If I go, oh, I only have 30 days to finish my life, I'm not going to goof around, and I'm going to be doing only those things that are important to me.
Yeah.
There will be a lot of ice cream involved.
Yeah, I remember. I think I remember one time when I have that intense feeling. I was in the airplane, and the pilot say we have problem and we have to go back to the You have to go back to the airport. The problem is, I don't know, they cannot take out the landing gear.
Uh-huh.
Oh boy,
So the
yeah.
problem, yeah, I
Yeah,
think
that's going to
that's
ruin
the,
your day.
yeah, that's the problem with that's very intense. Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So we are like circling up on the about the airport to
You got to,
what?
yeah, you got to circle sometimes for an hour or two to get rid of the fuel.
Yeah, the fuel, yes. And I was sitting near the window and see this fuel come out.
Oh man.
Everyone in the plane are praying or reading the holy book or whatever.
Yeah.
It was very intense, yeah.
That would be very intense, yeah. But
And
those are
I,
the, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I was remember, yeah, this the last day of my life. Oh no.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm
And so
still,
many people, they go straight to their phones and they're sending out text messages to their kids, to their relatives, their friends, like, I love you. I'm sorry for anything I've ever done. You know, this brings up all those things that we have left
So do it now
unsaid.
and avoid the
Yeah.
rush.
Yeah.
Yeah, what you don't want to do is end up with, here you are sitting in the plane, maybe you're going to crash and you have all of this unfinished business. One of uh, the things that this practice does is it tells you, this camera just does not want to focus tonight. It tells you that don't wait till the last minute to tell your daughter that you love her, right? Don't leave things unsaid because you think you can get to it later. And that makes some happiness.
Yeah. I wanted to bring it all back to the happiness
Yes.
factor. Yeah. You're being a participant in your life.
So another thing that will increase your happiness is acts of kindness. You've heard that old saying, commit random acts of kindness. It actually makes you happier when you do that. And they can be really small. An example, okay, just yesterday. So I live on the West Coast in Northern California, and this is a heavily Hispanic area. And that means, amongst many, many wonderful things, there are Mexican popsicles. And Mexican popsicles are far, far better than American popsicles. They are higher quality, made with real fruit, not just flavored water and sugar. And they are delivered to your doorstep because there is a little guy pushing a cart full of dry ice with popsicles in it up and down the street. And if you want one, you call him over and you buy a popsicle. Now, I've been doing this for a while. And not only do I buy a popsicle, but I practice my Spanish on the guy. And he gets a kick out of that because I can actually order my favorite flavors in Spanish. And he likes that because if he feels like, you know, I'm making an effort. And yesterday we had this conversation. He asked me first in Spanish, how is my English? You know, and then we carried on the conversation with English, and I was able to reassure him that his English was a hell of a lot better than my Spanish. And it made him feel good. You could tell that, first of all, here's this white guy who cares enough to take a moment and talk with him, and who appreciates him and is happy every time he sees him, and, well, carry on a conversation. Just a little thing like that made both of us feel better. And I got a popsicle out of it, so life is good. So little acts of kindness that you can do that nobody even has to know about. Back when parking meters were, all coin fed, I used to carry a pocket full of quarters when I was in San Francisco. And every time I saw a meter that was about to expire, I would drop a quarter in it, because the parking fines there are terrible. And somebody's life was made a little bit better by that. I felt good. And you can take that to extremes, and sometimes it's fun. Like, we have toll bridges here, and you go up to the toll bridge and you pay for yourself and you pay for the guy behind you. And then you can watch in the mirror as he comes up, because it's a pattern interrupt. He comes up ready to hand the money, and somebody, the toll person says, "Oh, it's paid for already, go ahead." And you watch them try and figure that out. And I used to do that all the time when I lived in Marin County. And then one day somebody did it to me. And it was like, what? Wait, oh. And I was happy as a clam for about 2 days from that one. So little acts of kindness will make you happier. Try it. You might like it. Now, another one that we talk about a lot is gratitude. Gratitude will increase your happiness. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to express your gratitude to other people. Sometimes that's nice, sometimes it's not. If you're in the wrong culture or in the wrong socioeconomic bracket, gratitude expressed to another person can be uncomfortable. I noticed this for the first time when I had a rich girlfriend. I would say thank you for something, and she would get uncomfortable, because it was like, because she grew up in a family with lots of money, for whatever reason, gratitude was transactional. So, the cultural asides are one thing, but generally, if you take even one day a week and just spend a few moments thinking of things that you can be grateful for, you don't even have to write them down. And it doesn't have to be all of them. I tell people, think of 3 things you can be grateful for. And it can be anything. And don't do it every day. Do it once a week. Then maybe twice a week, depending on how you feel about it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else got any favorite happiness making practices?
Yeah, I would love to hear about what other people do.
So I have for me, I find that my biggest issue is actually blockers. So not so much the going through these like a gratitude exercise, but the something that Cherie had mentioned earlier, which is this concept of inner peace, being able to live with your decisions or something like that. So getting to that inner peace. The void practice from last week actually really seemed to have made a difference for me over this past week in terms of quieting the voice in the head. But could you speak a little bit more about how to get to that inner peace and to deal with some of the blockers against happiness?
Okay. First, Aaron says, listening to music is my easiest go-to. And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The music that makes you happy is incredibly powerful.
I I agree with that.
Yeah, there are some musics that I listen to that 100% of the time will up my happiness level. One of them, for instance, is Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony is, I consider, one of the most beautiful pieces of music ever written, and one of the most potent, because he was deaf when he wrote it. Life kicked the crap out of that man. It did everything it could to destroy him, and the ninth was his reply back to life. And so if you want to ever hear somebody tell the universe to stuff it in the most eloquent way possible, listen to Beethoven's Ninth. But yeah, music can be incredibly important. So back to your question, Paylan. Blockers.
One we heard about today, as far as an example of a block, would be for someone who feels kind of weird about counting their blessings. Yeah, that can feel like a bit much. It can feel like a corny practice, I guess we could say. And in which case, you find ways to do it that don't necessarily feel so contrived. So
Yeah.
maybe that would be writing, leaving a note for someone that they're going to find when you're not around that tells them that you appreciate them, or thanks for doing that thing. Or you can just kind of savor things moment to moment, perhaps.
So one of the things that you want to do is to be very grounded in your practice. The reason the void practice that we gave you last week worked for you is because you did it.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you've been given practices that you've never bothered to do.
Haven't we all?
Yeah, we've all been there, it's true. But if you want to really get rid of the blockers, you ground yourself in a practice that works for you. And you don't make excuses about why you can't do it. You don't get distracted from it. Well, you will get distracted from it, but you haul yourself right back to it, and you do that. And that becomes your ground, and that helps you get around the blockers. Because when you find something that's blocking your happiness, you go to your practice.
I think that's key. Like you actively search for the things that work for you, and then you commit to those things. So for Aaron, for example, music works for him, so he's going to keep that in his toolbox and take it seriously and utilize it when it makes sense for him. And doing the weekly gratitude reflection, that's going to work for a lot of us, and we should commit to that and make sure that we do it.
And random acts of kindness is going to work for a lot of us, and you can do that. You can make that a practice.
And you just take note of, well, I don't feel like doing it, but I know that it works, and you just keep that in your mind. That's what's gotta get you through those little obstacle moments.
Yeah, and they can be really simple. Like I have a practice that I've done for years, which is anytime that I interact with any kind of a salesperson or a person behind the counter, I do my damnedest to make them feel good. And this includes on the phone.
Yeah.
I will do everything possible to make them feel like our talk has been productive. And I know Kyle has heard me do this because she's been around when I've gotten phone calls from some company that I have to deal with, or I have to call somebody. And
insurance.
Yeah, insurance. And I got to tell you, my insurance broker absolutely loves me. The lady at the Social Security absolutely thought that I was the most wonderful person she had talked to that day, because I made her feel good about herself and our interaction. And that probably meant that she was not mean to the next 5 people she talked to. So it goes around.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about this, is that when we get the ball rolling, we can create this upward spiral of shared happiness that not only increases our own happiness upon baseline, but that of someone else.
Yep.
And if we approach a conversation with a more positive, happy attitude, that conversation is going to go better. Maybe we'll get an opportunity out of it that we may not have otherwise. Maybe someone sees us on the street later that day and is like, wow, you know, there's something about that person. I want to do something nice for them. And of course, you're going to feel that upbeat feeling as well. So you're going to be sharing that forward with others, and it's all connected.
Yep. And I think that that is a good place to end. So
Yeah.
any last thoughts before we sign off? It's we have been going at this for about an hour.
Yep, I do. Where I rolled off to my bookcase was that on following your comment about service people,
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the phone, I automatically write their name down so that I can always reference back to their name, go, thanks, Becky, or thanks, Dave. And when you use their name, it makes such a difference because they actually feel like they were listened to. Even if I'm going to be ending the call quickly, it's actually really nice to use their name. And people who use name tags in the store, you know, it's nice to actually reference to their name. They're not just this nobody. And the thing that I was rolling off to was this, I picked up a weekly planning diary, and what I did for Sean Akers' recommendation from the Happiness Advantage talk was to write everything down. And so I had to pick 3 things that I was grateful for every day, something that I had thought about that was something not about those 3 things, something different. I had to do an exercise for at least 5 minutes. I had to meditate for at least 5 minutes, and I had to write to someone. And I did that for 21 days, and it worked so well. I did it for 60 weeks. And
Wow.
I kept all those diaries because someone said, why you keep doing that? I said, 21 days seemed to be not enough to really groove it in, but 60 weeks was actually something that just got me into this rhythm of being grateful and happy. And it's not enough to just do it once a week. It wasn't enough. It really is like, right, today I have to. So now currently with my husband and I, before we walk out the door, we have to say 3 gratitudes to each other and make them different from the day before. I know more about him because of that. He knows more about me because of that. And that shifted our relationship significantly. And if we didn't have that, things would just go on and puddle along and the frictions and things wouldn't get sorted out. But I know what he's worried about and what he is grateful for really informs me. And I think that's a very helpful thing in relationship. That you two got something where you're telling each other, and everybody should find someone who can do this little practice with, you know, name 3 things you're grateful for. It could be once a week, but we do it every day.
Yeah.
And it's been great.
I totally agree with everything you just said. All right, folks. Well,
Did we want to say anything more about the retreat, or do you think
we
got it
said
all
that we
covered?
were going to say, so we better say. What do we
Yeah.
want to say about the retreat that we didn't say? Some of the secret stuff.
Well, we were going to have 5 group sessions during that 30-ish days so that people can connect with one another, keep accountability going if that's what they're looking for, dialogue with us, ask questions, get support. We intend for this to be a facilitator-supported retreat.
Yeah.
So even though we are not charging a formal registration fee, it's going to be by donation, like most of the things that we do. And facilitator supported, you know?
Yeah,
So,
and we may end up doing 2 different talks or check-ins on one day, depending on how many people we get from Europe.
yeah, because we want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to do check-ins and to have that face-to-face support.
Yeah, so if we have more than 3 or 4 people from Europe, we will have a European time check-in and a American/Australian time check-in, because we tend to be able to, and an Indonesian time check-in, of course, because we all tend to fit pretty well into that. And
Yeah.
everything will be recorded and it will go up privately so that people have access to it.
Yeah.
And you can see what everybody else is doing.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be
Within the group, we want this to be kind of a, you know, it's its own little environment. We want to nurture that, so we'll be doing that. And I will be hopefully sending out both an email and posting a landing page for that within the next 2 days. That's my goal that I've set for this, because I want everyone to be able to prepare for this if they'd like to participate.
Yeah.
I think that requires a little bit of prep time, and we want to make that possible.
Yep.
So whoever is down, we are excited to have you, because we're going to be doing our retreat regardless. So to bring more people in on it, joining with us, that would be great support for us as well.
Yep. And we can make the world a
Yeah,
little bit better.
community stuff. Yeah.
All right.
And yep. Okay. So more to come about that. So thanks for listening.
All right. So now we will turn off the recording and say bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
And we will talk to you soon.